This conference will now be recorded.
Right. In the previous session, we have discussed about the program governance, like program governance structure, all that we have completed. In today's session, I am going to discuss about the business value part because as a part of program management, one must be identifying because, of course, if it's a couple of programs which are involved in it, because in the if you remember in the couple of sessions back, I have discussed this business value part, but on a high level note, not the detailed one. So today I'm going to discuss about the business value part. So in what way this business value is required in reference to the program management. So to begin with, business value nothing but the value which an end user is providing for the solution. What is that they're expecting us to develop? You take any example. Let's say, for example, we are developing a point of sale system for a retail store owner. Okay, let me put you this way. Whenever you are developing a point of sale system for the benefit of a retail store owner, it's not only about the kind of problem, what is that they are facing, but end of the day, we must see in what way this business value they wants to achieve in their solution. Because being you are into technical team, for example, I'll tell you how it is connected. For example, you are into program management where you are developing multiple programs. For that there are a lot of features and functionalities for identified requirements which you have to develop with your team. I'm talking about now when you are developing these in reality, on what basis identifying the requirements, whatever the requirements you have identified, on what basis implementation will be taken place by you? What are the basis for it? Can you tell me, Hassan? Again, I'm repeating. You are into program management, wherein you are developing multiple projects. Team. I'm talking about you means as a team. I'm talking about. There were a project. There was a project. For example, let us take point of sale system as an example. There is a project of point of sale system which you want to develop. Further, there are some requirements you have taken. These requirements has to be implemented and these requirements were many. Now, on what basis these requirements will be addressed by your team? Hassan, please go ahead.
Um,
Yeah, Hassan, please go ahead.
on what basis will these requirements be addressed by the team?
Your voice is very slow, very
Can you
low,
hear me?
Hassan. Can you?
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, yes. Now,
Yeah.
please.
So you're saying what basis?
I didn't get you. Can you come again?
So wait, what's the context?
Yeah. The context. My question here is, for example, you are developing an cloud-based point of sale system. Okay.
Right.
Again, I'm repeating. Of course, there are multiple projects are there in your repository under program management. So one of it is called cloud-based point of sale system is what your team wants to develop as per the requirement of the customer. You have got all the requirements, everything are there with you now. Now it's a time for you to develop these requirements in reality, right? Implementation is what your job. Especially on the context of agile I'm talking about, right? In the context of agile, because which is happening now is in terms of agile part. In the context of agile, if you see, in what way implementation as well as taking up the user stories or the sprint planning, whatever you're doing, right? So on what basis your team is identifying the requirements to start with? This is the first one, this is the second one, and all, right? So this is required in the first sprint, this is required in the second sprint, and all, right? So if that was the case, on what are the basis for identifying these must require in the first sprint, second sprint, third sprint, all that?
So
On what basis?
usually, you work with the product manager to gather the features that are required for the MVP. So we'll gather those list of requirements and put them on a roadmap. So
Okay, so
yeah,
hmm, carry on.
so you put them on a roadmap, and then based on the roadmap, you'll know which requirement comes first. But essentially, you're leading to the MVP based on the product manager's recommendation.
Do you say MVP is the final product?
It's the first version of the product or the first usable version of the product or
Is there
first
is there
marketable.
possibility to extend MVP, or do we require, for example, let's say, let me put it this way. For example, there was an MVP which was identified by you, wherein you have kept in the roadmap. After that, finally you came to know there is a gap between what MVP you have identified and what team has identified. Then what will you do now?
Add that into the next sprint and delay the MVP deployment date.
Okay. Right. On what basis you are on what basis you are taking MVP into an account?
These are critical requirements that make up the first visual
What
demo
does
of the
meant by
product.
critical requirements? What does it mean?
Sorry?
Critical requirements means, are you talking about the complexity you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the first, like the bare bone structure. For example, selecting the application or deploying the application, creating the first few features um,
So
of
you
the
don't
product.
consider complexity into account, am I right?
Yeah,
Or you
not
considering
taking
complexity as
complexity
well?
into account.
Sorry?
Not taking complexity into account, just taking priority of features.
On what basis? This priority, on what basis you are making this priority?
Uh,
Because you are
on based
developing in
on
MVP.
Yeah, based on the product manager's vision of the first iteration of the product.
Okay, what is there in what you call that? What is that you call that? What is that you call that? Whatever the vision product manager has
Yeah,
at this time, what was it called as?
the MVP, right?
Yeah, that's what. On what is the base for MVP? Base for MVP is to have a business value.
All right,
That MVP should have a business value. Then only you are taking it. Otherwise, there is no point in taking it. Do
right.
you agree on that? Right?
Yes,
See, you are developing an application, some XYZ, whatever it was. There is an MVP you are identifying based on the minimum viable product. Implementation will be taken place. The same thing, what are we expecting, which is something connecting to the development team, so that that will be continued further, right? That's what usually we do by putting all this in the product roadmap, and we do that. But on what basis this MVP will be identified? This MVP will be identified based upon the business value what a product owner has given at that point in time. Yes or no? Right? Do you agree on this? Not.
right. Yeah.
Point number one. One more time, one more point. For example, there is a sprint we are developing. Okay. We want to develop a sprint. Sprint goal has been defined by the product owner. So based on the sprint goal, what product owner has said, whatever the relevant user stories are required, so that team has identified. Now, when we talk about sprint goal, when we talk about the goal of the sprint, when we talk about that, sprint goal on what context a product owner has said to you? Sprint goal on what aspect product owner has said sprint goal based on the immediate need what customer has and what customer needs are. Yes or no? Right? So what they were expecting at
Right.
this level, this is what we call it a sprint goal. Now, let's say you have taken 4 user stories. Let me put you this way. Now, these 4 user stories you want to estimate. You means as a team. Okay, consider that point. Right. So your team has identified 4 user stories which are relevant for that particular sprint goal to reach in that particular sprint. So you have taken 4 user stories. Now these user stories you want to estimate. Now on what basis this estimation will be done by you? What are the basis for estimation? What are the basis you follow to do estimation? Because there are some story points we give, right? We give some story points for the user stories. One way of doing it, estimation when we talk. Because normally we do in 2 ways. One is either you doing estimation by giving some story points for the user stories, or else that user story can be divided into task and that task can be calculated in hours and days, right? These are the 2 ways. Now assume that you are choosing the first way. You have chosen the first way where you need to understand and you have identified, your team has identified to give some story points for the particular user story. Now what are the basis will you be taken here? What are the basis will you be taken to give a story point for a particular user story? What are the basis for that? If you want to give story point for a particular user story, on what basis you identify? Because team will do this in poker gaming technique and they will discuss and they'll come up with one number. Okay, in poker gaming usually we do that. So what are the primary aspects will they be taken into an account when they are discussing on that point, on that particular user story? What are those points?
This is the first user story.
Yeah, one user story. For example, one user story, they want to give some story points for a particular user story. Okay. Now, on what basis team will discuss? What are the basis they will be taken into an account
So
to give
they
story
will
points for a particular user story? What are the
they will
basis for
give
that?
story points um, to based on the
Story point on
business
what basis
value.
they will be identifying it?
Business value.
Based on, sorry?
Business value.
Okay, great. Right, that's the reason why I'm asking you this point. Yeah,
Right.
business value is the primary point. Accepted. Thank you. Why am I discussing? Because of this reason. Because if you want to give a story point for a particular user story, business value has to be considered, right? Appreciate. Now, is it only a business value? You see, that's it.
No
What else?
dependency.
Mm, dependencies. Okay. Next.
Complexities.
Dependencies. I think it comes next. Dependency may not be required at this level to you. Next.
Complexity.
Sorry.
Complexity.
Excellent. Right. Complexity is required. Business value is the first point will be taken into an account. Complexity you will be taking into consideration. Next point. Next. Any other point you will be
I'm trying to
taking into
think.
consideration. Gaps. gaps that you have identified, gaps
Right.
that you have identified between the existing to proposed. This is what in BA terms called as is and to be, right?
Right.
Gaps you have identified, the kind of risk which is involved in it, complexity, not only complexity, risk that is involved in it. At the same time, the amount of work it will be taken for you to complete. So, when you want to give some story points for a particular user story, you have to see the business value of that particular user story, point number one. Second, you have to see the complexity part, how much complex is this is all about. Next, you have to see the amount of gap which is involved in it, at the same time the kind of risk which is involved in it, at the same time the amount of work it will be taken to complete. So these are the basis which you will be taken to give some story points for a particular user story. So when you are talking about program management, so business value plays a vital and important role in identifying the real needs as well as the real requirements of the customer, which has to be addressed on the first ground, right? So now when we talk about this business value into elements point of view, means if you want to discuss this point into a elements point of view, these elements of two different elements are there. One is tangible elements and second is intangible elements. Tangible elements in the into the context of the business value I'm talking about, right? So whenever we are taking business value into context from the elements point of view, tangible and intangible. Tangible elements means the kind of monetary asset which stakeholders equity which is being involved in it, because stakeholder has invested some X amount of money in a business or a project where they're expecting some return of investment out of it. Return of investment need not be a monetary one. Return of investment in terms of the service of the quality services, right? So that one followed by the kind of fixtures and as well as utilities what stakeholder wants to achieve in their business, right? So tangible elements are the one aspect we have to consider when we are working on the business value. At the same time, we need to require and to understand about the intangible elements, which is majorly focusing on the kind of brand that particular solution or the requirement has, the kind of recognition what exactly that functionality needs, the kind of goodwill which is involved in it. At the same time, what are the kind of public benefits that end solution will be ultimately will be given you, followed by the kind of recognition in terms of the trademarks, all that. So when we are working on the business value, there are two elements we have to consider. One is about the tangible elements, majorly focusing on the monetary assets of the stakeholders, equities, all that stuff, followed by intangible elements here. Now, how you are going to deliver the business value means what are the steps to be taken into consideration to deliver a business value for any of the program or a project, whatever the project, being a program management, how you need to define a business value is what we have discussed. But end of the day, you need to know how what are the steps to be taken into an account to deliver this. If you want to deliver business value, these are the steps, as rightly you said in the beginning. Understanding the vision is required, first point, right? So you need to understand the vision of the organization or a product owner, whatever it is, right? So understanding the vision is important. At the same time, we have to be very clear with the business value of the project, what it has, because in order to reach the vision which a customer wants to reach in, there is a next one which is called mission. You know, right? Mission means in order to reach the vision in coming years, there is a mission statement which they have to prepare with, because this mission statement is a driving force for you to reach that vision, uh, reach that vision in another couple of years or so. So when we're talking about the mission part, the driving force is nothing but the mission. To drive this mission and all that, there is a clear cut of business value you require for a customer or for an end user or for a customer, they require a business value. They have to identify and they have to be very clear about the business value. Then only that mission has a sanctity. Otherwise, that mission doesn't have any sanctity at all. So, understanding the vision is what being a program management team who are working on the program is essentially required in the context of the business value. Second, we have to be very clear about the business value of the project, what exactly we want to get out of it. Because in order to reach that vision, there is a mission statement which is a driving force for them to implement with. The behind the driving force of the particular thing, this is what generally it was, right? So business value, having a clear idea about the business value is essentially required. Next, once we have a clarity over the business value for the project, we need to evangelize the value, vision, and as well as the business value and all everything to the team. This is where generally we have discussed about, especially in the context of agile. If you discuss whenever they are trying to identify the MVP from the product manager or a owner point of view, or else whenever we are giving some story points for a particular user story, what is that we did is that of course, we don't discuss about the vision, but we have to consider the business value one of the point. I'm saying one of the key element, right? I don't say business value is the only element for us to develop something, right? So evangelize the vision and as well as business value to the project team is essentially required, because even though you are developing an application which is basically from the technical point of view for a program management team, but end of the day, one should able in a position to understand. Means I'm talking about the team member should understand the real business value, what customer wants to achieve end of the day. Right. So if you have not identified the business value, then there is no point of the solution what you have given. But with that may not be their priority. Right. So this is what the third step one has to understand. Next, followed by this, foster a team environment to effectively deliver the value, because we have to create an environment to the team in such a way where they have to deliver the real value of what customer has to achieve. So when you want to talk more about the team environment, team dynamics and team environment and all, the infrastructure must be very clear. The infrastructure, whatever is required, sufficient infrastructure must be clear with. At the same time, clarity and requirements is also required, because if they want to reach to the business value, if they want to deliver an effective business value, end of the day, team environment, in the team environment they need to have sufficient requirements, and sufficient requirements has to be provided, and right requirements and sufficient requirements has to be provided, and right requirements has to be provided to the team. This is one thing. Next, once we have fostered a team environment and all, we need to measure the realization of the business value. So this measuring of the realization of a business value based upon the kind of goal what a product owner wants to achieve end of the day, which is called sprint goal. From the context of agile, I'm talking about this, right? From the context of agile, this is where measuring the realization of the business value in a form of business sprint goal which a product owner wants to achieve end of the day. So based upon the sprint goal, whatever the implementation we are taking, whatever the user stories which are relevant to reach that goal have been identified by the team members. So if they want to identify, there must be sufficient enough as well as relevancy of user stories has to be written. So for that, relevancy of requirements must be there. At the same time, whatever the sprint goal a product owner is giving, is nothing but the kind of business value they are giving at that point in time. So these are the different steps being a program management team when we are working on the product or a project, whatever it was. Being a program management team, we have to understand as well as we have to recognize the real importance of business value on this context. Is this clear to you, Hassan?
Yes. Yes.
Right? So this is what generally the context of the business value is all about. So When we are talking about the business value, because being a program management team, one should be knowing about this, because most of the people have some misconception over, most of the people, I don't say everyone, most of the people have some misconception over when we are working on the program management. In what way business value is connecting to this? Because we are ultimately end of the day working on the program of an application. But end of the day, when you are going to develop a logic for the benefit of a value to be provided, without you are not, unless until if you are not providing a real value for that requirement, then there is no point of developing a logic for something. So this is where generally business value come into picture. This is where generally business value come into existence. So this is how a business value is connecting to program management. Clear, Hasan?
Yes.
Right. So this is what all about business value, and tomorrow I'm going to discuss about other points, because whichever I
Okay.
have left over. So those points I'll be discussing in tomorrow's session. Right, Hassan? See
Right.
you then.
Right. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.